November 22, 2021. Mauricio Leal, the renowned hairdresser of Colombia's stars, was supposed to arrive at an important meeting to work on the Miss Universe pageant, but he never showed up. As the hours passed, his driver Jahir became concerned and tried to contact him without success. This struck him as extremely odd. Mauricio never neglected his phone, much less missed his tasks. Finally, he was able to find the stylist's brother, who was temporarily living with him. This man, John R., told her that he was not at the house, but that he would return around 2 p.m., and they could meet there at the agreed time. Both men showed up at the home in the luxurious Arboreto residential condominium, located at Kilometer 6 of La Calera, a rural area east of Bogota. When they entered, they noticed that the room was in perfect condition, but that a suspicious silence reigned. They headed for Maurice's room, which they couldn't get into. The door was locked from the inside. Finally, they were able to access through a window. Once there, Jair saw the terrible scene. Maurice and his mother lay in bed, with no apparent signs of life. And that was not all. While the woman's body was covered by a blanket, the stylist's was uncovered with a knife embedded in his abdomen. At that moment, Jonier, he grabbed his head and started screaming, "What happened, Mao?" The answer to this was closer than it seemed. Mauricio Leal Hernandez was born on 25th, 1974, in the municipality of Cartago, located in the Cauca Valley, Colombia. However, he lived most of his childhood in the Coffee Axis with his mother, Marlene Hernandez, his older brother, Johnny Rodolfo Leal Hernandez, and his half-brother, Carlos Andrés Garcia Hernandez. His father, whose name was not revealed, also lived with them. Since he was little, Mauricio showed a great interest in hairdressing. It fascinated him to see how a haircut could completely change a person's mood. Noticing this, Marlene enrolled in a styling course and let him accompany her, although they did not allow him to enter the classes. The boy watched everything from the window when he was 15. His life took a 180 turn. His father abandoned his mother, and they had to move to Cali at that time. Mauricio felt he had to take care of the family. He began waking up at 3:30 a.m. to sell arepas to his neighbors who were leaving for work. Then I went to school, and in the afternoon I packed packages. That year he slept only 4 hours to be able to perform all these tasks shortly after. Mauricio met a lady at church, and during a talk, he told her that he loved everything related to hairdressing. That woman got him a job in some friend's business. But as an assistant, Mauricio was in charge of washing the client's hair, serving them drinks, sweeping and mopping, in addition to opening and closing the premises. Meanwhile, he watched each of his colleagues to understand how that world worked. A month later, Mauricio already felt ready to become a hairdresser and asked the boss to promote him. This man was reluctant, told him to cut his hair to test his abilities. Nervous, Mauricio used scissors for the first time and demonstrated his potential, achieving the position he so craved. Despite the fact that he had no academic training, the clients did not take long to notice the gift that the young man possessed, which is why he became the star hairdresser of the place. Word spread, and everyone in town wanted to deal with him, which led to his boss increasing his salary. Over the years, Mauricio managed to build a portfolio of clients who confessed to him that he was opening his own hair salon. They'd go with him. This aroused the envy of his colleagues, who felt rejected and feared for their jobs. At the same time, something similar was happening in his house. Jonia sensed that his mother was very proud of her brother and felt displaced. But none of this stopped Maurice. At just 22 years old, he opened his own store, Mauricio Leal Peluqueria, in the Santa Monica neighborhood in Cali. Since its name was already synonymous with quality, customers didn't take long to arrive. He had so much work that he had to hire more employees, including his own brother, although the boy felt no passion for the hairdresser. If he was eager to make money and proved quite efficient in expanding the business, Mauricio moved north of Bogota, where he opened a hair salon spa. Her fame was such that by then all types of more special clientele began to arrive, such as beauty queens and singers. The names that resonated the most were those of Carolina Cruz, Lina Tejero, Laura Acuña, Cristina Humana, Andrea Serna, and Andrea Nocetti. Thanks to this, his work began to appear on magazine covers, television shows, fashion weeks, and even in movies. Despite being a kind of celebrity, he continued to show himself as a sweet and charismatic person, which is why they began to nickname Lomaito. In 2016, he decided to expand his business to the rest of the world, which is why he created a company called InCommerce SA with one of his most loyal clients. Thus, they opened the first international branch in Miami, United States. But what Maurice didn't know was that this woman was not from a drug dealer. This led him to be placed on the Clinton list, a decalogue promoted in 1995 by then President Bill Clinton and the United States Department of the Treasury, which included companies and people linked to trafficking black money. Not only were his accounts frozen, but he also had to use part of his small fortune to hire a team of lawyers to get him out of that situation. To achieve this, he had to put his mother at the head of the company. This caused a certain suspicion in his brother, who had always worked for him. Eventually, Mauricio was able to work as a hairdresser in Bogota again, and his clientele continued to trust him. He raised a good sum of money again, and he bought a luxurious condominium in La Calera, in which he settled with Maleni. By then, mother and son closer than ever. Jonier decided to detach himself a little from his brother's shadow, opening his own space of beauty. Jonier Leal Peluqueria, however, did not have the same luck as Mauricio, and in 2020, with the pandemic as the main obstacle to getting customers, he had to close the place. Meanwhile, Maurice's reputation as a stylist was growing. He was in charge of makeup and hairstyling for the renowned actress Tilda Swinton for the film Memory, which was premiered at important film festivals in 2021. 37 years was finally where he wanted. He had become known in other countries. At the other end was her brother, who was going through marital problems. And he asked her to come and live with him for a while. With the gentleness that characterized him, Mauricio agreed, and it was then, just when he was at the height of his fame, that something terrible happened on November 22nd, 2021. It was a very important day for Maurice. He had to sign an advisor in the Miss Universe Colombia contest, a unique opportunity for his career. However, at 6:19 in the morning, the stylist sent a message to Jair Ruiz, his driver, telling him that he wanted to sleep a few more hours and to go directly to the hairdresser. This surprised him since Mauricio used to get up early, especially if he had a long day of work ahead of him as the hours went by. Her absence became noticeable. Not only did she miss her engagement with the beauty pageant, but Karen, Yahir's daughter, a hair salon employee, also did not show up at her place. Stylist's right hand. She tried to reach him, but after 2 tones the call would cut out. Maurice looked like he wasn't answering the phone on purpose. Yahir also tried to contact him without success. He also tried calling Marlene, who didn't answer either. Finally, at 11 a.m., he managed to talk to Jonier and explain the situation. He told her that he could meet him at 2 p.m. at the door of his house, since he must have a key to enter. Once both men arrived at the residence, located at kilometer 6 of La Calera, they noticed that there were no signs that Mauricio or Marlene were there. They headed for the door to the stylist's room, which was locked from the inside. They rang several times without hearing any answer. Then Junior had an idea. He suggested to the driver that he enter through the window, and the request was already complied with. Once inside, he saw something that completely took his breath away. The bodies of Morris and Marlene lay lifeless on the bed. The woman's body was covered with a well-arranged blanket. The stylist, for his part, had a knife stuck in his abdomen, which he was holding with his inert hands, and there was a lot of blood around him. At that moment, Jonier grabbed his head and started shouting, "What happened, Mao? What did you do?" Jair also noticed that on the light table there was a cell phone, a box of sleeping pills, a glass, a large glass cup, and a letter. Both notified the authorities, who arrived at the scene at 4 p.m. Quickly noticed that both bodies had wounds from a short, sharp weapon. They also found 2 knives at the scene that appeared to have been used to carry out the murders, in addition to transferring the bodies so that the corresponding forensic examinations could be carried out. The agents set to work to discover what was hidden in that mysterious note that the stylist had left. It seemed like a kind of farewell. I said, "I love you. Forgive me. I can't take it anymore. To my nephews and brothers, I leave everything with all my love. Forgive me, Mom." The latter number was the key to access Mauricio Apos S. and Marlene Apos S. telephones, in addition to the token they used for their bank accounts. Everything seemed to indicate that it was a self-deprivation of life. However, the agents had to make sure that this letter had really been written by the stylist. Graphology tests showed that if it was his handwriting, but there was something strange. The strokes were diminished and insufficient. The alphabetical characters were irregular, and there were changes in the pressure that left some strokes colorless and others more intense with a greater discharge of ink. Upon receiving this information, the detectives began to think that Mauricio could have been forced to write this note before perishing as a result. They had to find out who was behind this ruthless act. The first to be interviewed was Yahir. He said that he had felt that Jonier pressured him to enter through the window, and I emphasized that he tried to resurrect Mauricio, but that his brother told him not to do it because it would be contaminated. He also mentioned the message Morris sent him that morning, and I stressed that it was not usual for him to sleep so late, and that it didn't speak that way. It seemed to be written by someone else, just like the letter. On the other hand, Junior was confident during the interrogation. He said that he took sleeping pills, so he didn't hear anything during the night. In the morning, the time when the events would have happened, he went elsewhere, although he did not transcend, where, however, on November 24th, the results of the autopsy arrived. And this statement fell like a house of cards. These showed that Marlene had received 4 wounds inflicted with a knife while she was sleeping, so she did not have time to react to the attack. Mauricio, for his part, had numerous injuries to his arms and nose, and signs of having tried to defend himself. In addition, he had 4 short stab wounds in his abdomen that led to his death. This ruled out the possibility that he had taken his own life, since only one would have caused him to stop breathing, thus clarifying the presence of a murderer at the scene of the events. This person allegedly used the weapon to initially stab Mauricio Apos' chest, arms, and even nose in order to bend him. But after being trapped in his soft organs and body, the author had to go down to the kitchen for another knife. Not without first hiding the handle of the first knife under a pillow, then forcing him to write the letter, and finally stuffing him with 4 fatal stab wounds. Likely that Morris, with a knife blade stuck in his body, would go down to the kitchen to find another knife. In addition, investigators learned that the stylist was right-handed, while the injuries he received were presumably executed by a left-handed man. the other hand, the toxicology report showed that before dying, both the stylist and his mother had taken 9 pills of sopiklone, a powerful sedative. Finally, forensics were able to establish that mother and son lost their lives between midnight on November 21st and the early morning of November 22. That indicated that Johnye would have been present at the house during the hours of the incident. Putting his alibi in check, it also showed that the message that Mauricio had sent to Yahir at 6 a.m. on November 22nd had not been written by him. On the basis of all this information, the deaths of Mauricio and his mother were declared murders, and the other hypothesis was completely ruled out. By then, the case had become completely media coverage, and dozens of stars were mourning the famous hairdresser. One of them was Andrea Serna, who wrote on her social networks that the news was impossible to process. He expressed that Maito's prodigious hands would be needed, but above all what he would miss being kind, always smiling and optimistic. He highlighted, he was an entrepreneurial man who managed, through tireless work and original ideas, to create a dream space. Gabriela Tafur. For his part, he said that the only thing bigger than Mauricio's talent was his big. He stressed that he had accompanied her in the most important events of her life, and that he was always there for her, unconditionally and selflessly. But it was also public knowledge that many people envied Maurice. The agents began to investigate the stylist's past, in search of enemies who may have carried out the murder. They thought about the problems with his supposed link to traffic, and they theorized that maybe he would have leaked information to be taken off the Clinton list. They also rival hairdressers who might think that without him present, they could keep their clientele. However, the reality was that the weapon had been removed from the kitchen, and the doors and windows of the house had not been forced. With this in mind, researchers decided to focus on the stylist's inner circle right at that time. Yonier began to behave strangely. He began giving interviews to television media, wearing a jacket that belonged to Mauricio. He also said that now he would go to his driver and that he would be in charge of his brother's hairdressers. Furthermore, he repeated over and over that Mauricio had murdered his mother and then took his own life, a hypothesis that had already been ruled out by the police between December 2021. In January 2022, raids were carried out at the stylist's home, which yielded very relevant results. When reviewing the security cameras of the Arboreto residential complex, the agents saw that on Saturday, November 20th, at 9:50 a.m. and 9 p.m. at night, Mauricio entered the house. Then at 10:52 a.m., Johnye arrived. The latter went out again on Sunday at noon. Then at 2 p.m., he entered the set again, and 4 hours later, he went to a family party. While at that meeting, Joni received a voicemail from Maurice asking for cookies, as they were able to identify when checking his phone at 11:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. On Sunday night, he returned to the family home. According to the autopsy, the time of the double murder. It would have occurred between 11:45 a.m. and 5:53 a.m. the next day. Finally, Johnny did not come out again until 11:19 a.m., at which time he contacted Yahir to tell him that he was not in the home, which was an absolute lie. This proved that Johnny had been the only person in the house when the events happened, since the level of surveillance and security in the exclusive residential complex was very high. It was impossible for anyone who was not a resident to enter without the cameras picking it up. It also proved that the suspect had lied in his first statement to the police. But these weren't the only evidence the agents found to charge the stylist's brother. During the search, the experts discovered a drop of blood on the stairs of the house, and another on a bathroom towel used by Junior. Both samples belonged to Marlene and a person who was related by blood to her, and that was not all. When they uncovered the bathroom pipe in Mauricio's room, they found human blood that could not be identified. In addition, in Yunye's bathroom, they came across several cleaning items and a mop. When consulting products, Mauricio's employee assured that she had left them in the toilet area, and not where they were found by investigators. They also noticed that the side of Maurice's bed was full of blood, while where Marlene's body was, there was no trace. As if this were not enough, the sheets on the woman's bed had just been changed, completely clean. This led them to the hypothesis that the mother had not died in the room where she was found, but that her body had been moved up the stairs from the 3rd floor. Where was his room? Towards the 2nd, where Maurice perished. The agents thought that Yunye was guilty of the double murder, and that he had cleaned up the crime scene with the products found in his bathroom. His aim had been to make the authorities believe that it was a self-deprivation of life and not a violent act. With this information, they began to investigate him as a suspect. They discovered he had a cut on his hand, that he assured that he had done it with scissors from work. However, that was consistent with the knife used to murder Mauricio and his mother. In addition, they were able to ascertain that she had many debts, some of which were paid off days after her brother Apos' death, when she withdrew more than 65,000 kopi from his brother Apos' accounts. As if this were not enough, the suspect's cell phone still needs to be tapped. John Ear had told authorities that on the night of November 21st, he had taken a valerian to sleep, but the cell phone data traffic report showed that he spent it surfing the internet and social networks. The most striking thing was that during the hours of the morning, the time when the murders had occurred, he had not used his cell phone. Having gathered all this information, the agents decided to interview Yahir again on this 2nd occasion. The driver stated that Joniere behaved suspiciously in the days following the stylist's murder. He reported that he questioned his lawyer about the inheritance, since he was worried about the forensic findings. Everything pointed to Junior having committed the deed to keep his brother's inheritance. On January 14, 2022, the prosecutor's office authorized his arrest, accusing him of double aggravated murder, concealment, and tampering with evidence. When CTI agents showed up at the home to arrest him, he did not resist and obeyed all orders. After speaking with his lawyer, he accepted a pre-agreement with the prosecution, in which he indicated that he would plead guilty on the condition that his sentence be reduced. On March 29th, Junior accepted charges in a public hearing. He apologized to the country and his family. However, in April of that same year, Ana Julieta Velázquez, his lawyer, he announced that his client would not accept the pre-agreement. While the trial dragged on, investigators were able to carry out a recreation of the fateful night the double murder was committed. During the 4 months prior to the incident, Joanier settled in the home, shared by his mother and brother, on the pretext that he was going through problems with his wife, so he could know the location of the house well, and the objects that he would later use to commit the deed. Sometime during the night of November 21st, 2021, he made both Mauricio and Marlene take 9 sedative pills each, and I hope they will have their effect. During the early morning, he attacked his mother with a knife in the 3rd floor room while she slept. He then moved to his brother's room and started beating him afterwards. With the same knife that attacked his mother, he tried to wound him, but the blade remained embedded in Mauricio's body. He made a long journey to the kitchen to get another knife, with which he inflicted a large number of wounds on his brother, with the aim of intimidating him. While Maurice was helpless, he got her to write the letter in which she left him his entire inheritance. Finally, he gave him the last stab wounds that ended his life, but that wasn't all. He still had to pass for another, pretending that Maurice was the author of such an event. For this, he modified the scene, moving his mother from her room to Mauricio's room, leaving the blood stain on the first step. Finally, He changed the sheets on Marlene's bed and used various cleaning products to try to remove the traces of blood, ignoring the one on the stairs. In May 2023, the prosecution asked for 60 years in prison for Junior, but the defendant again pleaded not guilty, further delaying the trial. On September 21st of that year, a new testimony appeared. This was given by Francisca Teresa Muñoz, who was a friend of Marlene since her school. He said he had stayed there for months due to an attack on her when a hooded person in a car next to her son and told them that he would murder them if she spoke. However, she finally decided to testify under oath because she was very ill and had little time to live. Before Judge 55 of Bogota, the woman pointed at Carlos Garcia Hernandez, the half-brother of the accused and the deceased, who at that time was in Jamundi prison. Valle del Cauca, serving a sentence for abusing a 14-year-old girl, said that this man constantly called her and asked her to talk to Marlene so she could get him out of prison. He was very angry with his mother and Maurice because neither of them had wanted to help him. Françoise tried to calm the situation but failed. Shortly before she died, Marlene told her that she was very worried about why Carlos was extorting her. He had told him that if he didn't give him 100 million pesos for the lawyers, would deprive Mauricio of his liberty. Then that man called Francisca again on the phone and told her that he was thinking of murdering her mother and brother because he had grown tired of waiting for help. Upon learning of this legal process, Charles filed a lawsuit against Françoise for false testimony, insult and slander, since he considered the accusations against her to be unfounded, and that affected his reputation. This case had no new updates. So did the Jonier trial, at least for a while. However, all of Colombia still remembered the case of the famous hairdresser. On November 24, 2023, Netflix premiered Story of a Crime, Mauricio Leal, a film directed by Jacques Toulemont and Alejandro Gomez Valencia. The plot focused on the research process carried out by an investigator to try to resolve the mystery of the case of Mauricio and his mother. The film was a complete success, since after 2 days, it was positioned among the top positions on the platform. On Friday, January 12, 2024, a new hearing requested by Daniel Peña was held. Yunier's lawyer argued that the accused had already served 725 days in pretrial detention, without his situation being resolved, highlighting that during the process, no request for an insurance measure or extension had been made. However, Municipal Criminal Judge 18, with the function of monitoring guarantees, denied the benefit of freedom due to expiration of terms, pointing out that there were delaying maneuvers in process. Finally, in February of that same year, the trial against the accused began. By that time, Johnny was accused of murder, aggravated by kinship by state of helplessness and severe cruelty, in addition to concealment, alteration, or destruction of elements of evidentiary material. When the judge asked him if he accepted the charges, he refused and said that he would never have been able to lay a hand on his mother and brother. The prosecutor's office, represented by Mario Andres Burgo, he assured that the accused modified the place of events with gloves and that he hid, altered, and destroyed evidentiary material. He stressed that the security cameras of Mauricio's house showed that he was the only person who entered the place during the date of the murders. Finally, he stressed that it was a trail of his on the stairs that gave him away. On Monday, February 26, 2024, Judge 55 of the Bogota Circuit issued the conviction. Francisca's testimony complicated the case as she accused Carlos Garcia Hernandez, highlighting a deep family conspiracy.